and welcome. You're tuning in to Unbreakable Hope with me, your host, Jessica Rose. This podcast is all about seeking the light. In each episode, we chat with someone who has either overcome the darkness or who is actively spreading light within their own community. So let's jump into today's episode. Today's special guest is Carla. I'm excited for you to hear this conversation as we talk about astrology and energy healing and feelings of being able to overcome the life that you're wanting to leave behind to step into the life that you're being called to be a part of. Jump into today's episode with us, and I can't wait to hear your thoughts. Well, I'm so excited to have you as a guest today to learn more about what you do and all these amazing things that you're interested in and how you're helping other people.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Well, I'm going to let you introduce yourself. I always feel like people introduce themselves way better than I could. So I'll pass it over to you and we'll jump into our chat.
All right. I'm Carla. I am the heart behind Heart Lead Studios, and I guide women to get laser sharp about what their true desires are, not by what society has taught them to desire, but what they truly want for their own lives. A life that's worth living, that feels joyful, and it's something that they are excited to live for. And how I like to guide them to do that is by figuring out through their unique energetics, through astrology, through ritual, through shadow work, and figuring out when it is time to make sacrifices, when it is time to work hard and make it happen, and when it's time to surrender and let source take over. And that's what I help women do, and take their power back and know their own worth.
I think that's really important. And a lot of people, they misunderstand this for like societal pressures. I think it's been something that's been going on since the beginning of creation, right? Is it's this constant change in what our culture and what our society implements on both men and women. But I love this like kind of growing from our history and women and really saying like, what is it that you are passionate about and that you want? Because I think there's still, even in America here, there's still communities where women are very isolated and not encouraged to seek out their own passions. What are some things that are for like starting out for maybe a woman who has been in that situation where she's very isolated and not been allowed to even think about her own wants or her own passions? Is there like some beginner tips or how you start people out?
Oh, right, for sure. Well, it kind of depends on everyone's super unique, and that's where I feel like my skills come in. With I have like so many. Anyone that's familiar with astrology will understand that I have a lot of Gemini placements, so it is like my superpower to like dig in. I'm like super, like I'm genuinely interested in getting to know people. And that's the whole thing, is like when you master getting what you want for yourself, it's really figuring out who you really are. And really that's like the big thing is like being able to, like, a lot of times we take on other people's identities even. I think that's whenever, like when it comes down to that, I mean, at least through my own experience, I'll just give you an example of my own. But I always wanted to be a woman that was financially secure on her own, so that she wasn't able, or so that I would be able to make my own choices when it came to like my own living situation and things like that. And so for me, that was my first priority, was like building that solid foundation for myself so that I could relax. And so basically tapping into my divine masculine energy and making space for the divine feminine to relax and release and be able to just breathe and actually listen to my own heart. So that's kind of like where a lot of people I feel like need to start, at least in societies where I think a lot of women are encouraged to like just kind of be more traditional, at least like in the city that I grew up in, like where it's just kind of like, hey, I want to, or that we're supposed to kind of like let a man take care of us. And which ended up being totally opposite from what I ended up doing. Like you and I are kind of similar in that way. We've both been in male dominated industries. So like I was in construction and you have a background in the military, right? So it's just kind of like for me, it was a little bit opposite. And I don't think that's necessarily the road for everyone, but for me, it was really tapping into my masculine energy and like creating safety for myself so that I could get really picky about when I picked the person to share my life with. And because I knew that I could create that safety for myself.
Mhm. I love that. I mean, the foundations of really meeting people where they're at in that moment and individualizing it, because you're right, we're all different and we all have different experiences that we build off of. I love what you're sharing there. It reminds me of when I was growing up, my dad always wanted to teach me to do everything because in his mind, like if I knew how to change my tire, I could change my oil. I knew how to do all kinds of construction, like basic work like that. Is that I would never need a man. Therefore, I would always just have him. And
Mhm.
my mom would get frustrated because she's like, well, teach me these things. And my dad said, no, 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 no. Because in his mind, he thought, well, if my mom didn't know how to do those things, she would always need him. Therefore, she
Yeah.
would leave him. But for me, it was, oh, he'll teach me all the things. So then I won't leave him for like another man. So it's kind of this like funny thing as we were talking about the differences in the masculine and the feminine energies and our family dynamics really changing our thought process in that. I feel like a lot of our listeners might also have similar questions starting out. Maybe some of this is the first time I'm hearing it is the masculine energy versus the feminine energy. I always find that interesting because I think there's so many misconceptions about it. What would you say is maybe like or was it like a quick and easy way to describe what exactly that masculine energy is and that feminine
Sure.
energy and the relationship of the two within one person?
Right. And I think the main thing that I want to cover when I'm talking about this is balance. So there is and when I say a shadow or the light of a trait, I personally don't believe one is bad and one is good. Like there is to see the light, you have to live in the shadow to truly um, to be able to like see the light for what it is. And so people that have, gone through a lot of darkness in their life, whenever they're able to like pull out and get into the light of a trait, like they have this like deep sense of gratitude when it comes to that area of their life because they've had to work through the shadow. And so like the brightness is brighter, if that makes sense. And it's a more rooted, grounded, unshakable knowing, like in the core. So when we're talking about masculine and feminine energy, so like in masculinity, when I think about masculinity, it's the go for it energy. So it's like it's the so like and then the feminine energy is kind of like the oracle. It's the digesting of the energy. So a lot of times the feminine actually can hold the shadow. It digests what is the shadow, and then it is transmuted by the feminine. Okay, and then but we have masculine and feminine in all of us. So, like, say, we're in our oracle moment, and I'll bring this kind of into like just menstrual cycling and stuff like that, which is going off a little bit here, but just kind of like in that oracle moment of like when we're in cycle, and it's kind of like we naturally want to go into retreat. And so that's kind of like where we're in that feminine flow, we're bringing in guidance energetically. And then like once that part of our lunar cycle has passed, we have this like energy of like wanting to go out and do things and create things, and that is like kind of activating our masculinity. And so it's just kind of like the flow of like knowing when to go and when to take in. So it's like when do we push and when do we receive? So the feminine is the receiving energy, but the masculine is like when we take what we have received and then we go and we build something with it.
I really love that analogy. I think you can really get behind it, especially as you were talking about like the shadow and the light. There's both. I think of that a lot, especially when I'm talking about gratitude, is there's this idea that we should all be grateful for the breath in our lungs. And my joke is, have you ever had the wind knocked out of you or seen the breath in someone else go away. And I think that's where like kind of the mindset is when you've been in that dark place, when you've been amongst the shadows, like you said, you respect the light more, or maybe you can see the light better. So I think of that like with my husband when he was in ICU and respiratory distress, like literally like, oh, when my husband's breathing and not like breathing normally and not panic breathing, right? It's great. It's a blessing to me because I've seen it and I've known what that's felt like without it. And I think that there is this part where I think a lot of 80s, 90s kids, right? We get the yin and yang. I don't know if that's popular.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah, yeah, for
I
sure.
was kind of like imagining that piece of it all. But I love your description there of the two and how they both live within us. It's learning how to make them work together,
Mhm.
bringing that to light. I'm super curious. I didn't even ask you this in the beginning, but what got you into astrology and this journey of energy healing? I'm curious to know a little bit about that and just how your passion has grown. How long have you been doing this?
Okay, so I mean, it's kind of a long story, but it has changed over time. The religious upbringing that I grew up in was Buddhism, actually. So I always did a lot of meditation, like even from like a very young child, but like it's very different from what I practice today. So there's a lot more structure in Buddhism than because there's like certain ways to do things, and it's just like any organized religion. There's going to be a lot of structure that can in a lot of ways not let you get into the spirit of flow. And but there is, for me, it's like take the best, leave the rest with any and I have been interested in philosophy and religion pretty much my whole life. And growing up in a family where um, as a Buddhist, I was like, I had to go to adult education classes because the ones that were here locally for kids were in Vietnamese, so I couldn't understand the classes. So I always had to go to the adult education classes. So I was going to these like really advanced religious teaching classes from a super young age, and as I grew older, like I just kept, because I think the first thing I realized was I kind of saw, actually, the first thing I want to say is what I'm super grateful about that situation was that it taught me to be very comfortable with being spiritually different from everyone else. I will say, like, I was comfortable with that because that's just who I was, like, from my whole life. Like, I never was the majority religion. And so I will say that I never felt like I had to do the same thing as everyone else when it came to spirituality. Like that was because I always had to be different. And so it made me like more open-minded to learning other religions. And I also feel like that made it to where it was much easier for me to stray from what I grew up with too, because I'm used to not fitting in with the flow, if that makes sense. Like it wasn't as hard of a break for, I know that a lot of people have to go through. So for me, religious education was always something that was super freeing for me, and like learning about other cultures. And like for me, what the study of religion did for me was understanding people's values and where they come from, and being able to like just know, it's a way to really know people and understand their hearts. And so for me, it was really, I got really obsessed with learning about all kinds of faiths, because for me, the whole point of like having a relationship with God was like, I really just wanted everyone to love each other and to have world peace. And like that was something that I like genuinely cared about from a super young age. And I was like, well, if we're all gonna get along, then like I need to understand where they're coming from, you know. I didn't experience the same thing as my parents growing up. So I want to say that like I'm very lucky that I never had to deal with a lot of the things that my parents had to deal with when it came to spirituality. And I'm like really grateful for that. Um, and I know that that has made connection really hard for them with society because they felt very ostracized when they left the church.
Mm.
So, and I got encouraged a lot to not trust people, if that makes sense, when I was younger. And to me, that didn't feel real. Like I was like, no, like
Yeah.
even someone that's trying to convert me to their religion, they're doing it because they don't want me to go to hell. So that means that they love me. Like that was my interpretation of that as a child. And so like you get what I'm saying though? Is
Yeah.
that we're all doing our best. We're all doing what we think is going to help the world. Otherwise, we wouldn't do it. No one gets up in the morning and is like, how am I going to like mess everyone's day up today? Like, no one does that. Like, does that make sense? So, I mean, that's what's been really important to me is just kind of like figuring out how we can all live together peacefully. So, human uh, behavior has always been really interesting to me because, and I feel like religion is a huge part of that. Spirituality is a huge part of that. But in my upbringing, it was actually it was shameful to believe in God. So
Mm.
I wasn't really allowed to do that until I kind of recently kind of tapped into it. But I've been studying astrology my whole life. Actually, probably since I started studying astrology when I was 10. And it kind of just, when I first started using it, I used it as a tool to not rock the boat. Like, I was like, I know how people want to receive me energetically, and this is what's going to make it easy. And like, people are it's just going to keep the peace. And that was that's the tool I used it for when I was younger. And then, so whenever, I mean, I've just been using it my whole life. I think there was a brief period in my life where I totally just cut out religion from my life completely, and was just really career focused. But whenever I'd say I went through my second spiritual awakening was in my last career, and I was starting to notice that I was repeating cycles. Like I was going back and I was seeing like this cycle keeps repeating, and I don't want it to repeat because it was like coming up in places where it was important to me and I didn't want it to get ruined. So I was like, all the it's like all these things are happening again and again, and the factor that is the same in all of those is me. So what am I doing to continue these cycles? So it really just made me, it was like I didn't care what I had to do to fix what was in me to neutralize that problem or to make it neutral, because I didn't want to keep seeing the things from my past show up in a career that I was super passionate about. I didn't want my voice silenced in a boardroom, like like when there's millions of dollars on the line. Like that was like not. I didn't want to. I didn't want that to terrify me every time. And so I guess what I decided was is like I got back into it because I was trying to. I've always done this where I put people in little like mental files, their astrological stuff, because it makes it easier to communicate with people when you understand their energetics too. And so I was using it for that, and then I started doing a new part of astrology that I hadn't really done before, which was moon work. And so I started doing like ritual practice, and there's a lot of stuff, layers that I'm not realizing. Everything's coming up. It's like because I went through a time because I practice herbal astrology now. So I do ritual practice with like tea magic, and so but I first got my it was like it's like source put me in all these places through my life to master different skills to put me where I am right now, if that makes sense.
Yes, that
So I went through a time in my life where I was able to overcome an autoimmune disorder through my own studies with herbal medicine. Like I wasn't getting the help and support that I needed through the medical field. And I was just like, I did not get through everything that I've been through for this to be how things go for the rest of my life, if that makes sense.
oh yeah.
And so I just got really obsessed with herbal medicine. Probably I studied so many books and like, and it's so much easier. It was so much easier to study stuff like that back then because there wasn't so much fake news on the internet everywhere. Um, so I'm glad I like studied it when I did. When there's like, you know, there were these books that you could go to, you know, that you would know that there was legit information in there, and so I was able to get through that part of my life, and so now I use herbal ritual with a lot of things, but now not only do I use them for like the herbal medicine part, I also bring in like the spiritual essence of herbs and like even the how different planets activate herbs and what kind of energy they bring. So for me, when I started doing moon magic, because I've been in and out of therapy like my whole life, but when I started practicing moon magic, it really helped me actually make that connection to source that I always felt like there was something more than me in my spirit. But through that practice, it actually helped me feel it for real. Like it proved it to me, if that makes sense. And so for me, being able to have a connection with a higher power was the last part I needed to totally heal.
Mm.
And that may not be for everyone, but for me it was. And so for me, I had this career that I really enjoyed and you know did for a decade. I was so passionate about it. And then once this part of my life came into my life, it was like I almost had to go through like a mourning process of like letting go of that because it was like it didn't light me up like this does now. And so like I knew that if I could walk away from something like that I loved so much, like this is because this is all I can think about now, then that's how the transition happened. You know, it's like if it was like God had put his hand in me and was like, okay, like you've learned what you were supposed to learn here, and this is my plan for you now. So that's what I've been. That was the. I tried to tell that story the best I could, but that's the transition, I guess.
I love it. And honestly, like I it's so funny because we've known each other outside of here, like the friend circle here, and all these things you're saying. I was like, how did we not have a lot of these conversations in person? This is wild. So I feel like there's going to be so much follow-up conversation of all the things we're talking about today.
Yeah.
Really cool. Uh, I also I get what you're saying, and it's something that I feel like I've been going through lately too. Is as your life change, and I was able to accomplish this really big thing professionally. I fought for attention for this project. I fought for funding for this project. I fought to complete this project. And then getting pulled in kind of this different direction. So between a few different circumstances, losing my job during the pandemic, and then my husband's cancer coming back, I feel like myself, I've kind of been shifted and moved. And you can kind of feel when you're not that I don't love what I did, and I still do some projects and stuff there. But when you're kind of like you're being pulled, you're being called to a different area, like you said, like being reached down by the hand and said, all right, you're good there. Now you're going to go over here. It's just it's kind of hard to explain it as you're saying it. And I feel like I've been going through that for a few months. I'm like, oh, like I'm like I'm connecting my feelings and what I'm personally going through to what you're saying as well. And you mentioned the autoimmune disease in your story, and I think that's something that so many people go through is they seek out Western medicine, and that's not what heals them. It's not what works for them. And you know what? For some people, it does great,
Yeah.
but there's so many people that it doesn't. And I have a couple friends who have been healed through being able to do more of that internal practice. There's an app, I don't remember the name of it, and I don't want to try and say the name and accidentally like endorse the wrong thing. But there's like an app that you put in all of your stuff and it tells you all of your different moons and all this, and kind of like what you were saying is how you interact with other people.
Mhm.
Um, I think a popular one, if people can't really conceptualize this or understand this piece of it, is a really popular one is 16 personalities. Have you heard of that one? Like you go online and it can kind of tell you a little bit of how you interact with other people. I love personality tests. Like that's one of my fun
Oh,
things.
same.
I've done,
Does that have to do with, that's not the Enneagram, it's something else.
yeah, it's not, and I can never remember the name of it. Like when I'm talking about it, I'm like, oh gosh, darn it. Uh, like the ENJI. Someone
Oh,
listening,
yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay.
like, boom, I know
Yeah,
that.
I'm an ENFJ.
I didn't
So,
even remember my letters. I just remember when I
yeah.
took the 16 personalities, it was in a toxic work environment, and me and my colleague really understood the value of it, but our supervisor and program manager didn't actually get the value. And we thought it was really funny because in my 16 personalities, I was Daenerys Targaryen, and my coworker was Jon Snow, and how we had the state divided. I had the South and he had the North. So he was Jon Snow, like King of the North. And then I was Daenerys Targaryen taking over the South. So it was just really funny how all that kind of tied in and played. But then him and I learned a little bit more about each other and how we could best support each other and work with each other. That was the whole point of it. But my
Yeah.
supervisor and program manager, they didn't actually get that and they didn't learn anything from it, which then
Yeah.
made me and my coworker even more discouraged because we're like, we thought we were actually making a step in the right direction. So if people are like getting what we're talking about, like understanding people's signs and their moons and their energies and how you can communicate effectively with that person, then that I think is maybe a popular example that people can understand is like, 16 personalities or True Colors is another one that maybe people have heard of. Those are kind of popular ones.
Yeah.
But I love this. And I love like what you're saying, right? Is that people want to grow and change like deeply because that's how we're made. We grow and we change and we develop. And that you've been able to take this passion that you've had since a kid, just loving to learn more and what gets people thinking and their values and kind of grow it into all these different aspects to heal not only yourself, but you're helping other women heal as well. I really want to talk about your events because I think that would be cool if you're up for it.
Yeah.
I know you had an event recently that sold out. It was super exciting. And you have some coming up. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit more about that. And maybe if there's people in the local area that are interested in joining or even just following and hearing more of what there is to offer, there may be someone who's doing something similar in their area.
Yeah, for sure. So for the community here locally in Oklahoma City, I host full moon events every month, and and then and I'll come back to this later. But the full moon events that I host every month is like there's a different sign each month that the full moon is in through astrology, and what I do for the clients that join us at the ritual, I pull their chart up specifically. I design them a customized ritual that's in alignment with their unique energetics through their natal chart. And what we do is we work through the shadow of that archetype of that astrological sign. We release it, we give it back to Mother Earth to be regenerated and reborn into something more beautiful because energy cannot be created or destroyed. So we send it back to be changed into what it needs to be now. We give thanks to our ancestors for giving us that shadow that at one point protected us and kept us safe, and like giving it permission to be loved and to return back to source and be transformed into something that is going to be useful for generations to come after us. And then what we do is I guide them through a sacred tea ceremony. I do an oracle reading that the guides that come in and they talk to us about what herbs to work with in ritual and what themes that everyone in that collective there is kind of energetically working through at the same time. And so then we're able to manifest the new light part of that archetype of that astrological sign. And we all manifest that together. And I send them home with personalized kits for them to have a intimate moment with the moon back home. And that's what I do at my full moon ceremonies every month.
That's cool. Going back to what you were saying, right, is each individual person, we have a unique buildup and having that energy and knowing where we are in the moon cycle and our life cycle and being
Yeah,
able to support that. And it made me think as you're talking about the energy, kind of releasing the energy and giving it back to the earth to do what needs to be done with it. It also made me think for a moment of Marie Kondo, the organizing guru, where one of the things that she says is, when you're getting rid of something, like think it, release that energy. Because I think sometimes it it may sound silly or feel silly, but you don't realize how something, like I say, like something as simple as like, thank you for providing to me what you provided me in the moment. I'm giving that up. You're not holding on to it. And it also ties into, the body keeps score, like we're storing all this stuff in us. And so giving yourself an opportunity to be able to release it, be grateful for the time that it had with you, and then release it on, I think is such a beautiful thing that a lot of us could utilize, is letting go and
yeah,
preparing our hearts and our bodies for the energy that is to come for us to move forward.
yeah, for sure, for sure.
What are some of the
And
other ways besides these really cool moon cycles? Or, you said you had something else you wanted to circle back to.
yeah, I so whenever I do these moon ceremonies, the full moon ceremonies, they're so the way that the lunar cycle works, and this is once you're initiated into moon magic through a ritual, your body will start to actually feel the activations of it, but or it might. Your body's only going to release what it's ready to release because we can only um, take in so much source energy that we're only allowed to pour in what we can hold. And so whatever is ready to release, if you're ready to release a lot, you're going to be able to feel a lot of energy moving and you'll be able to experience this in real time physically. But if some things need to be slower, depending on your energetics, it might need to be slower because that's what's going to be best for you in your highest outcome. um excuse me. So the new moon, I'm going to be doing new moon ceremonies. So this is like once we've done the release ceremony at the full moon, there'll be a new moon later in the year where we're actually going to fully embody that manifestation that we called in at the full moon. So it takes time to integrate that higher version of ourselves, because if we make space for source, like we let go of the shadow, then there's this open space in our heart that God can fill up. But it takes time. We have to let go of the things that were in the space completely because there has to be room there. And so it takes some time to like release all of it. But we ask our ancestors and the earth to support us and the cosmos through the ceremony. And then as we're integrating, it comes in as it can. And then at the new moon, in theory, you should be able to like totally embody that. And then that's the full manifestation energetically. So like I'm fully embodied of that higher version of myself in that archetype. Now, from the empowered part of that, I'm going to manifest this dream or this goal. Does that make sense?
Yes.
So like but the thing is for people to do the new moon, I need them to come to the full moon of that archetype. so that they're prepared for that. They won't get anything out of the new moon if they didn't attend the full moon. So, um, if that makes sense. So it'll be a little while before those start happening because I just started the series back up for the full moon. So it's going to be probably a lot. It'll be looking for that in about 8 months or so. So that'll be something I'll start offering for the community. And then the other ways that people can work with me is you can book a astrology reading where I do an oracle reading. I bring in our guides and angels and just ancestors, anyone that's there in spirit that's wanting to help them in their highest good on this. For me, astrology is kind of like the syllabus for your life that you signed up for. And it's a lot easier to get through your homework and through the semester if you know what the plan is. Like what are you actually supposed to accomplish? And not saying that anything has to be done in a certain way. It's just like, hey, this is what your soul wanted to accomplish in this life. And it can look like different things, but these are the energetics of it. This is what your soul wanted whenever you came into this life. This is where you're going to be supported. This is where you're going to have challenges. So this is what I go through during a reading. But whenever we bring in the guides, like what I like to do in those sessions live is that we look at the part of their chart that is relevant to what they're going through right now. Because a lot of times what I've noticed over the years when I've gotten astrology readings from astrologers was that they would bring up stuff that they kind of guessed I was going through because of what age I was at, but I'd already gone through a lot of that coursework. So it was just reopening an old wound instead of like, hey, actually, I'm over here. Like, I know most people wouldn't be here till they're 40, but this is where I'm at. Does that make sense? So it's just kind of finding where people actually are and helping them from that spot. So I ask a lot of questions during the live. I have a questionnaire that I send to people. And so that's what I do that's different from other astrologers is that I actually figure out exactly where you are now and give you the information that's most relevant for the next level of growth in your life. And that's what I do on the one-on-one readings. And then I also do coaching containers where we go over that person's unique energetics. We figure out what exactly they're wanting to achieve, what's the best way for them to get there. Like for an example, how I like to explain where I was saying like when it's time to sacrifice something, when it's time to go after something, and when it's time to surrender. Like for instance, say that I want to live in a place where it's paid off. Okay. Okay. There's a few ways that you can get there. First of all, you got to figure out what kind of sacrifice are you willing to make? Because anyone can have those things, but it's like, what sacrifice are you willing to make? What kind of work are you willing to do? How long is it going to take you to take that across the finish line? Are you going to be able to sustain your energy doing that till you get it across the finish line so that you're not leaking energy, wasting energy, and like not getting yourself to where you need to be? So we get really razor sharp about a strategy to get the things that people want so that they can actually take it across the finish line. So that's what I do with my clients.
I think that's a really good point that a lot of people don't think about is having the goal, having the strategy, and then is it sustainable with your energy and your resources? I think that's a big piece that people miss. I'm sure you hear like the SMART goals, which sometimes like being in the field that I've been in professionally for over a decade, it's like, what? Like hearing it over and over again. I caught myself saying it multiple times where it's kind of important, but I think that's part of it when you're evaluating where you're wanting to be and what your goal is it sustainable? Is it attainable? Like, do you have the energy? Do you have the resources? So I love that you brought that up as well. And how many cool ways that people are able to work with you, whether to just get more information or have that longer term support and being able to participate in these rituals, and the next step that you're offering for that is really cool. What's the best way for people to connect with you or to book you? What's your preference?
Well, you can do any kind of booking through my website, and I'll make sure I share that with you. I'm also on Instagram, Heart Lead Studios by Carla. I'm on TikTok, same name. I'm Carla Corley on Facebook, and those are good ways to get in touch with me on there. Yeah.
Awesome. I love that. I feel like I've learned so much about you, even though we've known each other, and we've had many of conversations. This is really cool. And I know this has been something that's been a great benefit to some friends of mine as well, that they were sharing with me, like, oh, I've learned so much more about myself and how I can communicate with friends, and just that extra layer of growth that often gets forgotten is a different type of internal work, and using the things around us that are already there and already in a cycle, and really merging all that together. I think it's so fascinating. I've loved astrology so much. Also a Gemini, which I'm sure, easy to figure out. I'm very stereotypical Gemini.
Yes, you do have like this beautiful inner child essence for sure.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's so much fun. And while we're talking about this, I'm going to share a really fun and embarrassing story. Everyone's going to catch on before I get to the end of the story, so it's totally fine. My husband and I were first dating. He had a tattoo on his arm, and I looked at it. I said, "Why? Why do you have a tattoo of a lobster?" And he said, "A what?" I said, "A lobster. Why do you have a tattoo of a lobster?" And he said, "It's a scorpion." And then I said, "Okay, why do you have a tattoo of a scorpion?" He stared at me, and I'm like, and he said, like pointing at himself, and I'm like, "I don't get it." And then when he said, it's like, oh my gosh, which is so funny because I never would have thought of like getting a tattoo resembling Gemini on myself. Sounds like something I think if people like were to meet me, I'd be like, yeah, totally. It's probably like anyway. So I think of that all the time, like when I'm thinking of astrology, where I was like, I just didn't even get it in that moment when I needed to get it. So I would love to learn more and get it in the parts where it's important. It's more serious
Yeah,
than just recognizing.
I'd love to do a reading for you sometime.
Yeah, that would be so lovely. Um, so yeah, I want to make sure to give space if there was something that we didn't cover, or if you have some final thoughts for our listeners.
I guess I'd like to just bring up that I know a lot of us are going through shedding in our lives right now on an energetic level. Like you and I kind of discussed that a little bit here on this interview of just kind of like grieving the old life and like moving in the next direction. Just know that collectively we're all going through that right now. That's a collective energy. You're not alone. I think a lot of people, almost everyone I've talked to, is going through something very similar. So just know that we've got energies moving through that are, it's round of March time, like a lot of that's going to clear up. And so if you're in a place right now where you're not really sure where things are going to go, just know that energetically they're going to start to level out and that everything's going to be fine. You can do anything for 2 months.
Yes.
Yeah.
For for those that are not living in Oklahoma, Oklahoma is a great showcase that anything is possible in the year 2026, because I have to mow my yard. We have green grass. I have like flowers coming up. It's 34 degrees outside in January. I don't know. It's crazy, but I love it because it just really goes to showcase that um, the earth is changing. We change and we grow, and anything is possible. So I'm really excited. Well, thank you so much for your time and your energy, right? Because this took
Thank
energy to be
you.
here, and sharing a little bit more about this world of astrology and energy. And I'm really excited to learn more about it, and I hope our listeners are as well.
Yes. Thank you so much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, listeners, for tuning in. If you found this episode inspiring, please share it with someone you never know who needs more light in their life. May this serve as a reminder that there's always darkness in the world. Do not let it consume you. Always seek the light. Please take a moment to do the good old subscribe, rate, and review. Your support means so much to me, and it helps me spread more light and love. Until next time, be kind, be loving, be human, and don't ever let anyone steal your hope.